All right, welcome everybody to our discussion today on warehouse performance excellence, where we're diving deep into the art and science of running world-class distribution centers. My name is Robbie Cluett, and I'll be the host for today's discussion. I'm the VP of Customer Success for Context Supply Chain, which is a specialized supply chain technology and consulting firm based up in Vancouver, Canada. I'm also the acting VP of Marketing for the CSCMP Toronto Roundtable, and I'm excited to have this discussion in collaboration with Context and CSCMP Toronto. Welcome to CSCMP members, supply chain leaders, professionals, students, and anyone else that decided to join us today. We definitely appreciate your attendance and hope that you find a lot of value and actual tips from the discussion to come. I'm thrilled to welcome Juan Raya, Senior Director of Engineering Operations at Medline Industries, which is a leading manufacturer and distributor of medical supplies, providing products, education, clinical programs, and services across the continuum of care with operations in over 125 countries and territories. With decades of experience under his belt, spanning multiple industries, Juan knows that operational excellence isn't just a buzzword. It's the backbone of efficiency, safety, and customer satisfaction in today's ultra-competitive supply chain. Juan, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Robbie. I look forward to the conversation. Again, very, very humbled to be on the call today and share my experience and some feedback.
Awesome. Yeah, it's great to kind of get on here and have a good conversation. I know we have some questions from the audience, so to speak, some registrants, and we kind of devised some questions, some burning questions spanning a number of topics. So I'm looking forward to getting into it. Now, over the next 30 minutes or so, we're going to be challenging Juan on what truly separates data-driven warehouses from those stuck in quote-unquote firefighting mode. How to win over frontline teams when introducing new processes, which I know something about in my business, and also where to draw the line between game-changing technology and needless complexity. We're also going to tackle the delicate balance between resilience and cost effectiveness. We're going to explore the leadership behaviors that sustain top-tier performance, and we're also going to uncover the metrics that deliver quick wins and lasting impact. So for those who are in attendance, buckle up. It's time to rethink what excellence in warehousing really looks like. So Juan, to kick things off and to level set, can you please share how you personally define operational excellence in a supply chain or warehousing context?
Yeah, no, thank you, Robbie. As you said, operational excellence, buzzword, but it's really rooted in culture. And what I mean by that is you're constantly looking at every corner of your operation, your building, your warehouse. You're looking at your people, you're looking at your process, you're looking at your technology, and it's continuously in the pursuit of finding and uncovering little nuggets within the operation. The days of low hanging fruit, there's very little these days, right? The big
Mhm.
bulk, for the most part, most companies, most warehousing has caught up with technology, has caught up with the kind of the best practices of what we're doing today. So it's really rooted in continuously to strive for those little nuggets in the operation, and
Mhm.
really empowering your entire team members from the shop floor to the top floor to really understand that you constantly got to be at the pursuit of finding those nuggets, finding those inefficiencies. I call them hitting factories sometimes, and
Mhm.
really empowering your team members to be on the journey with you.
Yeah, I can't agree more with that sentiment. Now, was there a pivotal moment in your career that shaped or reshaped how you think about operational excellence?
Indeed. So, as you said, I've been doing warehousing work for over 20 years. So
Mhm.
I started out on the floor. I was the one kind of going into manufacture, started out in manufacturing and really understanding, hey, how process works, how systems work.
Mhm.
But it was really early in my career as I was working in manufacturing where I learned the most about the process from the people doing the work every day. So as I thought about data, as I thought about process, early on in my career, it's bringing in the people that are doing the work early in the process to adopt the change, to adopt ideas, to
Mhm.
to pilot things and to troubleshoot things. So as I stated, I'm a true believer. Operational excellence is rooted in people. In when I say people, all across the spectrum. Whether again you're the person on supervisor leading 100 team members, or if you're the manager leading thousands of team members, is really
Mhm.
empowering every person in the building, in the operation, and giving them the opportunity to bring ideas forward, creating that platform. So again, early on in my career, it is rooted in people.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I completely agree there as well. I can share certainly if we have more time. I wouldn't want to take up the discussion on that, but I certainly have the exact same sort of feeling and experience as you on that. And you understand that more as you talk to different people, as you try to get these initiatives forward. How important that really is. Now, the first topic that we have, as I mentioned before, we kind of split this up. We tried to cover a wide variety of different themes and topics. And why not start with technology? So, as you know, dashboards are really everywhere. You can't go 5 minutes these days without a dashboard popping up. But insight doesn't always lead to action, as you know. So, in your view, what separates data rich warehouses that improve from ones that stay stuck in reactive mode?
Being focused, right? To your point, we have a lot of data, whether I'm a supervisor or a director of a building. There's so much data out there. And really, as you look at your metrics, as you look at your service metrics, you look at your cost metrics, your safety metrics, your people metrics, your cost metrics, I
Mhm.
think it's very important to understand focus and ownership. And what I mean
Mhm.
by focus and ownership is you've got to constantly serve the customer. Otherwise, your competitor will. But staying really grounded and focused on the mission at hand for the week, for the day, and then being able to delegate and empower your team to go out and stay focused on those metrics. I think that's very important to really hone in on those key top three areas. And a good example right now is kind of where we're living some of it today is we're balancing our cost, we're balancing quality, and that's the constant struggle. In most cases, you might find some wins in the quality, but it's going to be trade off with some additional labor. So it's constantly keeping that in balance and focusing on your top areas and empowering your frontline leadership, empowering your team members to go out and really help address those gaps or those issues. But I think that the important part is staying focused and not
Mhm.
losing sight. Because again, metrics will change, data will change, but a lot of times we look at too much data and we look at too many metrics and we lose the focus. So I think that's very important to stay grounded in those top areas.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think one thing that's important. I'll kind of go back to my experience in customer success. Dealing with customers and ensuring which ones are getting value, which ones are happy. There's really something to be said about vanity metrics, right? So there's metrics that they look nice, but how much value can you really derive from them? And I think you've alluded to making sure that you have the right ones, looking at the right ones, and you're constantly evolving. So yeah, I absolutely agree with that. Now,
And
keeping on the
Robbie,
theme,
sorry,
yeah.
if I could just add too, as we think about metrics, I mentioned different levels. It's also important to understand your tier one and your tier two and your tier three
Mhm.
metrics. And I think that's important to your point. Sometimes again, we got so much data out there. We got data for our supervisor, we have data for our managers, our directors, we have data for engineering or for support teams or maintenance teams. But I think it's important to understand to tie your tier one metrics to your tier two and your other metrics. That way we know that we're influencing the top level metric. And I think it's very important, again, going back to focus and ownership
Mhm.
of those areas of focus.
Yeah, that's a great point too. Yeah, I completely agree. There's different levels, as you said, and they sort of all lead into them. Not just leading and lagging and things like that. They're just there's tie-ins. If they're not all there, you don't have that feedback loop, I guess, so to speak. Um, Now, keeping on the theme of technology and automation, there's also no shortage of warehouse tech promising transformation. Now, if you go to any conference, I know ProMat just happened relatively recently, and there's conferences going on right now, in fact. And that's all you sort of hear about. The last couple of years, it's been about robotics and automation, and again, each one of them provide or promise value and transformation. But what's been your litmus test when you kind of go to these conferences and listen to these presentations? What's your litmus test for knowing when a tool is truly adding value versus just adding complexity? And this could be systems as well, not just robotics or automation.
No, that's great. Great question, Robbie. I could, over the last 5 years, 10 years, I can count the number of conferences I've been to and speak with vendors and talk to vendors. I think it's very important for me as well as we go when I visit these conferences and talk to vendors. It's
Mm-hmm.
also understanding the strategy for your organization. And so I know we all have labor challenges. We all have challenges with our operations in terms of whether do I have enough equipment? Do I have enough MHE? Do I have the right MHE?
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's very important to understand as we talk to, again, understanding the strategy and finding the right technology, because you're typically going to have your top 2 to 3 that are very strong in that space, and obviously
Mm-hmm.
price and cost all comes into place. But I think it's very important to have very open conversations with the vendors up front. And what I mean by that is being blunt and open on, hey, who's a customer that's done this? Can I speak with the customer? Can I go see the solution in action? Can I go hear it from the folks that have experienced it? And typically those customers that are willing to share then say, hey, open book, really open. Yeah. And they're really open in sharing that, hey, it's not all positive. We're going to have challenges with adopting change, not only with the technology itself, but also with the change management process. So
Mm-hmm.
once we go and talk to vendors and they're really open and sharing some of those case studies and some of the preliminary numbers and what I always talk about, the hockey stick effect, that you're
Mm-hmm.
doing well, but you're in a dip for the next 2 to 3 months and you got to create a plan to get back up. Having those conversations openly and upfront, I've seen have proven value of when we select a vendor or select a solution that we want to test or pilot. I think that those are the things I look for in talking to vendors upfront of some of
Mm-hmm.
those opportunities to talk to some of their customers, early customers.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's about the right solution, but it's also about the right partnership. And these days, you're never really buying a one-off solution. You're buying a system, and you're also engaging in a partnership, especially with the stuff that I do, and it's in context. Being a SaaS provider of a warehouse optimization system, the sale is basically just the start of it, and then the implementation follows the training. But we stick with the customer, until the engagement ends, essentially, whenever that is. But that's the idea of ensuring that they first get that quick win, right off the bat. But also knowing that there's going to be challenges. There's going to be either data issues. There's going to be stuff that comes up, and how do you work, through those, right? How do you have do you have the right partner that kind of works with you through all those challenges, that knows that they're going to happen, but sticks with you and ensures that you do get that outcome that you were promised.
Yeah,
So
Robbie.
yeah.
Now just you hit it as well. The partnership. You said it really well there because
Mm,
what happens when you have those conversations early with the customers, what I've learned as well is like, yeah, we struggled with this vendor or this solution, but by the
mm,
way, we stuck with us for the year. We had a hypercare support, and I know a lot of vendors these days now are creating a model where they say, yep, we're with you through the implementation, but we're going to stick around based on the duration of as long as you want us based on certain criteria in the contract and things like that. But I think that partnership and saying, hey, this is not a one and done deal. We're going to be in this because we're going to continue to improve together and grow together. That's impactful as well.
yeah, absolutely. Now I want to move on to culture and change management. I mean, that's kind of the next theme. I think you mentioned how important that really was, in any technology adoption. But in operational environments where routines run deep, and we all know they do, and change can feel disruptive. How have you successfully brought frontline teams on board with, say, new ways of working, especially with the when the benefits aren't immediately obvious? So I guess kind of tailgating on, implementing a solution, whether it's automation system. How do you sort of navigate that from a culture and change management standpoint?
Yeah, no, I just have a seat at the table. Again, I've rolled out solutions where I've gotten feedback through interviews, one-on-one sessions. I've done roundtables with team members, with supervisors in my past life to get feedback on, hey, what's your biggest challenges, and what if we do this, or what if we bring this solution,
Mm-hmm.
and really just be open with them on why we're doing it. That's important as well. So I've seen it both ways where, hey, this is something the organization is going to do regardless of your feedback. That I've
Mm-hmm.
seen it that way. And the other one is, hey, we're exploring a new solution. There's a couple on the table. We really value your perspective. So, I think of a solution we rolled out a couple years ago trying to improve the safety of our frontline selectors. And we were looking at certain, call it some suits to help them through the selection process.
Mm-hmm.
and really had the vendor come on and come in and try the different suits and have the team members try them on. So that way they knew that they had a voice and they had feedback. So there was any opportunity I have, always bring the team member in the room, the supervisor in the room, the director in the room, to kind of give try on whatever it may be, look at it, touch, feel, smell it. That's very important. That's very important. I would say early on in my career, that was something I was missing along the way. That why isn't this sticking? Why isn't this working? But
Mm-hmm.
having a seat at the table, having them try, test it whenever possible is great. And again, on the other side, there's been times, hey, here's what we're going to do, but here's the why we're going to do it. Getting in front of the why. It's going to be painful for the next 3 months. Things are going to be very disruptive, but here's what I need from you. And again, that starts at the conversation at that VP or director level, and then cascading that message. And most cases, I ensure that I'm in partnered with that director of operations because at the end of the day, it's his operation and they have to be bought in. So it's very
Mm-hmm.
important to get all those call those stakeholders at that level involved early.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I was just going to mention, kind of as you were talking through that, everybody tends to perceive change differently, right? Depending on what position they're at. So you have your middle managers, you have your users. Like say you're talking about a system, you have your users, your middle managers, your directors. Then you have say the OpEx team that's knows why they're putting it in, but not always does that get transmitted down, to the operation or to the users. And you kind of mentioned it, just make sure they all have a seat at the table, so they all kind of know the why, so you can understand why it's happening. And maybe some people will think that they're getting replaced, right? They'll push back on it when it's really not the case. Their job's just being enhanced, so their position is being enhanced. They're being given a new way of doing their job. So I completely agree with that, and that's been my experience as well.
And I would add on to on top of the change process, communication. I'm sure you hear it all the time because
Yeah.
it's not a one and done deal. You gotta, again, the first time I heard this, the second time I heard it this way, oh, the third time and now I understand it. So the more we hear it and see it
Mm-hmm.
and talk about it, I start really understanding what's coming my way or how my day is going to change with this new process. But I always kind of give them, try to give enough time ahead of time so we can continue to communicate this, whether it's a town hall, whether it's
Mm-hmm.
through email or with startup meetings. Again, if we're impacting that frontline team, startup meetings have been a very, very impactful way to communicate the change as well. So again, leveraging the different conduits of communication is powerful when it comes to change.
Yeah, absolutely. I had the exact same experience where we basically implemented a new strategy, new e-commerce strategy that was driven by our system a couple of years ago with a e-commerce brand that was affected by COVID. And this is going back about 4 years now. But it was a much different way of dealing with their e-commerce, which was helping them reduce their shipping issues that they had through their peak season. But it was a way different way of doing things, and it was a huge enhancement, a huge difference. But one of the things we had to do was to have those daily stand-up meetings, so everybody knew what the new challenge, what the new process was. Obviously, to recognize the individuals that were taking to the process to make sure they got recognized. But we saw, as soon as they knew that we were tracking certain things, like here's what we're tracking, here's what your expectations are, here's recognition. That went a long way. To your point, communication and also that group sort of dynamic. That was, as you mentioned, that I kind of thought back to the one of the big wins from that project.
Yeah, let's face it, no one likes aha moments, right? Especially
Yeah.
the person doing the work every day. So we try to do our darnest to always make sure that we don't have any ahas for our folks getting impacted with the change.
Exactly. Couldn't agree more. Um, Now, Juan, when it comes to leadership, I guess moving on to the next theme, what role does it play in your mind in sustaining operational excellence, and what does it look like in practice? And this could be operational excellence leadership. This could be working with, say you're talking about a DC director that's in charge of, implementing something that's been provided to him or her. What are your thoughts on that?
No, yeah, it's a great question. I am a true believer in leadership is modeling what the behaviors you want and expect to see. So what I
Mm-hmm.
mean by that is to your point of let's say walking into a building, if there's a certain way of how we engage with our team members, a certain way how we work cross-functionally, how
Mm-hmm.
we engage with our support teams from headquarters, I think it's very important to model that. And so as we think about leadership, it's really understanding that the eyes are always on you, right?
Mm-hmm.
With again, a supervisor are leaders, managers are leaders. everyone's a leader. So it's modeling those behaviors to say, not everything is going to go your way or the way we plan every day. You know, you can plan the work, but then you got to work the plan, and then you got to rework the plan. So I think it's very important to understand that how you react to adversity, how you react to challenges, how you react, that people are watching. So I think about leadership principles is always trying to keep that in mind and model those behaviors. You know, we recently went through a go live, auto store go live,
Mm-hmm.
and we had tons of team members. It's the second shift, middle of the night. You have leaders, you know, you have directors out there, you have managers out there, you have team members out there. These go lives never go as expected. You're going to always have something, and
Mm-hmm.
so we're struggling with standing up certain pieces of equipment at the workstations. We're struggling getting the throughput out what we need by hour.
Mm-hmm.
And as a leader, and you kind of see it real firsthand, the reaction to adversity, the reaction to challenges exudes across the shift. So
Mm-hmm.
as myself out there and other leaders are out on the floor, we had to make sure we kept our cool. We had to make sure that, you know, we weren't, you know, yelling and, you know, all these other things that could happen.
Mm-hmm.
And so as you see some of these situations where team members are getting frustrated, I don't have my supplies, I don't have my tools, my computer isn't working, I can't log in. It's very important to make sure that those behaviors are kind of, what do they say, cool, calm, and collected, because it
Mm-hmm.
exudes and it sets the tone. So I think as a leader, you got to ensure that everyone's watching and you got to model those behaviors. That way, other folks around you can kind of model that as well and say, okay, things are calm. This is not,
Mm-hmm.
things aren't going as expected, but we're going to get through this.
Yeah.
So I think that's a recent example I can think of how it's very important as leadership we model those behaviors.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, you know, the thing that I would resonate on your answer there is, you know, like I certainly agree that it's that you know, that's a great part of leadership. And also in my experience too is you kind of know if you've done it before. Obviously for me going through the same project, you know, it's different operations and everything, but we kind of know the, you know, what can happen. So what we try to do is we try to you know, when we're giving recommendations on change management to leadership or even talking to users, we're telling them here's what can happen, here's what to be prepared for. You know, we are looking for outcomes, we're looking for the quick wins to kind of get people pumped up, but we should also expect that there might be some data problems, there might be some, you know, things that you're going to notice that need to be further set up that we couldn't notice before. And that's always 100% of the time that's going to be the case. And if you don't recognize that, if you're saying, well, the first time I hit a problem, I'm just hands off and I'm not going to go any further. You know, it's not 100% perfect. You know, it's a process. And so if you set those expectations, you know, and keeping your calm, like you just said, but also making sure that your expectations are set to, hey, that we don't expect this to be 100% perfect for the first 4 weeks. Here's what you can expect, and here's why we're not going to worry about it when it comes up because we know 100% of the time it's going to happen.
Well said, Robbie.
Mhm.
Exactly.
Um, Now, Juan, in your experience, can you talk a little bit about how OpEx fits into the larger organization? Um, its mandate, you know, the authority that it has, and even the influence on operations. I'm sure without the right organizational design, there can be some competing priorities, you know, when it comes to you, you know, moving into a site and talking to certain different users that have their priorities, you have your priorities. How do you see that fitting? And what would be the ideal sort of situation in your mind?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I'll pull from another example from my past life where we were brought in to build some leader standard work capabilities, and the challenge in rolling out and really institutionalizing or rolling out an operating system, if you will, is
Mm-hmm.
ensuring that the folks that are involved understand what we're doing. What I mean by that is a lot of times the premise is you're adding more stuff on my plate. You're adding more things to my plate.
Mm-hmm.
You're not taking anything away. So today I'm already working 50 hours, 60 hours a week. What you're asking me to do is now come into some meetings, get trained up on some additional, but I still need to run my business. So I
Mm-hmm.
think it's very important early on to do some discovery work and some groundwork before these programs come into place, because then you get to understand what are their challenges that they're fighting constantly and how do you really adopt the model to fit their model and improve. So you kind of take a little bit of what they're doing today, how do you improve that? But then at the end of the day, to your point, we're rolling out an operational framework, right? Whether you
Mm-hmm.
want to call it leader standard work or a daily management operating system, you're building this cadence of operational excellence through behaviors. So it's very important to understand some discovery work, understand their challenges, because I've seen it both ways. They're trying to do the right things and they're aligning to the company's organization's goals. Or in
Mm-hmm.
most cases, they're doing things because they've always done it this way, and they really haven't been told or instructed to do it differently, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's very important to do some discovery work up front, ensuring that as you're rolling out programs, operating systems or operational excellence programs, type programs, that you are keeping the end user in mind and you
Mm-hmm.
are eventually aligning to try to help that individual or those departments to get some things out of their off their plate so you're not adding more time to their week.
Right. Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. That's a great point. I wasn't even going there when I thought when I was thinking about it, because usually you just think, hey, if I have good ideas, if I'm trying to help, but sometimes you don't even think about the fact that you might be adding something to somebody else's plate that again doesn't necessarily wasn't there before, and now you're coming in and adding something. It's like an excellent point.
Yeah, no,
Um,
I would just add I've been three rodeos on some operational excellence programs, and that seems to always be like a hitting nugget as we roll out is not really understanding as we think about the customer again, whether it's a supervisor, director, or manager, the
mhm,
things that they're seeing. And a lot of, in my experience as well, has been, 60% of the time they're doing meetings or other things, administrative things that could be alleviated. So I think those are the things we kind of chip away at first to try to help, and then you
mhm.
kind of bring in a program and a structure to help with their day to day and week to week operating plans.
Yeah, absolutely. That's an excellent answer. Now, as you can imagine, this can be tested. When it comes to introducing a new system or process, how do you identify and communicate the early wins? So it's you're at the point where you've kind of had that discussion with them. You're implementing something. You're building up a foundation where you're not necessarily adding something extra, but you're sort of helping out with the structure of work. Um, Beyond that, how do you identify and communicate the early wins or early win metrics that help the team see value quickly and stay engaged, or anything else that could help, you know, in addition to early win metrics or early wins for kind of what you're looking for? How would you do that to sort of ensure that people stay engaged? Maybe 3-4 weeks down the road.
Yeah, no, I'll go a little bit back to taking some things off their plate and eliminating some non-value activity. Again,
Mm-hmm.
I'll give an example. One of the things I found quick wins is 5S programs are early out of the gate. You
Mm-hmm.
engage whether it's maintenance or your outbound supervisor, your outbound director or manager. 5S in an area is very impactful, and the wins are visual. I'm a big visual management
Mm-hmm.
individual, and the visual management early on helps not only the supervisor and that frontline team members, but also the team members. What I mean by that is I clock in, hey, I don't have to wait in line to get my equipment. It's a very structured approach in organizing,
Mm-hmm.
and they see it and they feel it as well. So that's usually kind of a quick win where we go and roll out 5S programs and get them involved in
Mm-hmm.
a fun activity. I used to do. Here's a red post-it, or here's a green one, here's a yellow one. If it's green, you use it every day. Red, you don't ever use it, and yellow, maybe you use it once a week. So
Mm-hmm.
getting them involved, and they see it in the organizations. You kind of empower them to make some decisions on the tools and the things they need to use every day, and kind of where they want to organize them, how they want to organize. So I get them involved. So that to me
Mm-hmm.
is usually kind of a quick win, and we talk about it and we celebrate it. We had a kickoff in my past life where we found some early wins on the driver's day, and what I
Mm-hmm.
mean by that, the drivers were waiting for their trucks, waiting to find their equipment, their walkies. So we did some 5S and some organization and said, hey, you know what? You don't have to go and search for this stuff, and so we celebrated with some donuts and coffee. So things like that early on, and again, 5S organizational type of visual management tools help really early on with some operational excellence programs.
Yeah, excellent point. Now, do you think one that gamification has something to do with that, or has a role in that? Like, would you ever look to implement gamification on certain things to sort of create a bit of competition, like friendly competition,
Yeah,
when it
no.
comes?
We had it was somewhat different, but we had incentive programs where, hey,
Mm,
we were looking at optimizing our, whether it's the first shift or the second shift, and really gamifying some of the more to shift level
mm,
in a previous life. And it was around incentives and factoring in, hey, if you get 100 hours out of the building or 50 hours out of the week, you get, a piece of party and a percentage of some of that. So gamification is huge in the terms of performance of a building. I've seen
mm.
that in place. We've rolled out in place that as well. Um, but yeah, I think those types of programs for sure are huge opportunities to continue to move the needle.
Yeah, yeah, and I think you mentioned it too with the stand-up meetings. Say at the beginning, one of the things that we noticed, and I mentioned it, I alluded to it at the beginning, was just the recognition of the shifts. So I kind of had the same experience. We had three shifts that were kind of not going head to head, but we kind of wanted to create a bit of competition because they all had the same target, and that's most people are kind of driven by a healthy amount of competition. So that we saw that really helped quite a bit. Not just having that internal competition there, but knowing that hey, you're incentivized to hit your goals, and also there's a little extra if you go, if you're the one that kind of went well and above. So I think that's in my experience has been a healthy win.
It has, and I'll share another example. So when we did a pilot again in my past life with the technology, we had a gamification for who could adopt the tools sooner. And what we meant is we had certain metrics for the tool of using these suits
Mm-hmm.
of adoption, using them, adapting to them, and we were handed out gift cards. We partnered with the vendor, and we were doing gift cards for a month to see who could ramp up the adoption. So yeah, it goes a long way when you and then at the startup, they'll kind of jab at each other and say, well, yeah, you had the easy, kind of the easy aisle or what have you. But yeah, it helps really bring some camaraderie along amongst the department.
Yeah, and going back, just like a quick note on that is at least when it comes to change management, I love folding in psychology, just human psychology, because it just works so well. When it comes to habit building and how people learn, and as long as you implement these processes right off the bat.
Hey, Robbie, there you go. Can you hear me?
Person's going to learn, there's a better chance the person's going to adopt it, as opposed to them sort of like slowly ramping up. So if you kind of implement that, knowing that the more you use it at the beginning, the more that habit's going to form, and the more you're going to be successful later on.
Indeed, indeed,
Mm-hmm.
and I think to your point as well, when it comes to psychology and change management, it's early on. It's important to get it on adopted early on and
Mm-hmm.
set the expectation early on. Otherwise, if you go forward and you start kind of changing the game, removing goalposts,
Mm-hmm.
uh, experience with that goes sideways with the team members, and they eventually, challenge the new technology.
Now, before we get to the quick fire round, um, can you share any common mistakes that the OpEx teams typically make in your experience, or any other OpEx teams that you've been around? What are the common mistakes that they typically make, and how, in your opinion, can they steer clear from making them?
Engage cross-functional teams early.
Mm,
What I mean by that, maintenance, EHS, your safety teams, your operations teams, your engineering teams, and shoot, in most cases, it's your HR teams as well. I've
mm,
seen too many pitfalls where we go fast and furious to go roll out a program or start kind of changing habits and not
mm.
include those groups. That to me has been number one, is not really engaging our cross-functional partners, because though you may believe you don't need them early on, you will need them on the journey, because as
Mm.
I said, OpEx is culture, and everyone is part of that. So it's very important to engage your cross-functional teams early on.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I was curious because I have experience with this in terms of engaging cross-functional teams, and also understanding, say if you're trying to implement something that a user is meant to use, say you're an IC user at a warehouse or a distribution center, and you have your metrics, you have your job responsibilities. From an OpEx standpoint, how important is it in your mind to understand, who's tracking what? So like if you're trying to improve certain metrics at the building, it may sound obvious, the way that I'm introducing it to you, but oftentimes in my experience, you find that, there's different people there's different hierarchies within each company. And sometimes it's, the metrics that you're tracking, you're not even talking to the person who's, at the top looking at the performance of it. You're talking to somebody else and you're trying to get them to do something, whereas it's not really being tracked at that level. Does that make sense? Does that sort of resonate with you in terms of aligning the I guess the organizational chart, or like where people are actually pushing certain metrics?
No, that's a great example. I've had similar examples where inventory control has reported in through finance, and it's you're
Mm-hmm.
just like, oh, it's an operational because you're addressing my damages or customer returns. So
Mm-hmm.
and it goes back. That's what's important to address, bring folks in early because I'd rather have the tough conversations early on than
Mm-hmm.
down the road. So some of those alignment calls, to your point, I'm tracking specifically. I've been where we're tracking improvement in image cycle counts, and
Mm-hmm.
then there's another team tracking them as well, and they're tracking certain metrics, and we kind of cross bump heads because I'm reporting the number and they're reporting the number, and we're influencing or impacting their metrics. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I completely understand where you're coming from, and so that's very important early on to understand that, and that's why I feel like having them a seat at the table and bringing up those concerns early and
Mm-hmm.
addressing it early goes much longer in setting up your programs as you go forward with operational excellence.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let's get into some quick fire questions. This section is meant for a bit of fun, just to close the session out. So I have 4 questions, and what I'm looking at here is really just 1 to 3 forward responses. Feel free to go a little bit longer if you want, but essentially the first thing that comes to your mind when I ask you these questions. So the first thing is, what's the first thing you look for when walking a new facility?
Visual management, visual management, cleanliness. IVS visual management is huge. Here at Medline, we have some lights that are pedestrian. It's the first time
Mm-hmm.
I've seen them. We have pedestrian walk lights, and right away, safety, boundaries, visual management is huge. And I speak right now from Medline, but I've been in many warehouses where you walk in and it's just like sometimes you think of I have a teenager. I walk into her room and I see her room. It's like, okay, how do we button up here? But visual management and cleanliness is huge for me.
Right. Yeah, I've never seen those lights. I've seen a lot of creative solutions, when it comes to walking paths and, managing, congestion and things like that. But that's an interesting one. I'd love to see that one day.
Send you a
The next
photo.
one, the next one is slotting optimization's contribution to overall operational excellence, underrated or overrated?
It needs to be a way of life.
Mm,
Slotting, if your organization has no slotting program or slotting tool, you are missing out.
mm,
So I've been part of organizations where we've had strong programs. I've been part of organizations where we have no programs.
mm,
Fortunately, I'm with an organization right now that way of life daily, not only from efficiency, but capacity management. You are managing your capacity, you're balancing your customer service, you're balancing your labor costs, you're optimizing. So
mm.
it has to be a way of life.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Um, if your team only focuses on one thing this quarter, what should it be?
For us, it's continuously looking at cost and quality. We're
Mm,
constantly looking at cost and quality. I would say the organization I'm with right now, Medline, we are very dialed in on both metrics, and we're constantly looking at. I talked about the tier one and the tier two.
mm,
I would say for the next 6 months, our fiscal year ends in December. We have a strong focus on both cost and quality and ensuring that we're not trading horses there, and we have
mm,
to balance both very, very carefully to continue to service our customer.
mm. Absolutely. Now, you mentioned this, or you alluded to this, I would say, a little bit earlier, but the very first thing that would come to your mind is for this question, the best way to win over a frontline team when rolling out change.
Bring a chair and have him or her at the table.
Mhm,
Really, really bring, and I truly mean it. Like over the years, again, doing this for 20 years, it's really just having that individual that sees and feels the work every day, that
mhm,
understand the ins and outs. having them at the seat of the table early on is very critical. So not only does it benefit the team members, but it also benefits the organization.
Mhm.
Because I've seen where they've called out blind spots for a lot of
Mhm.
solutions, and personally that I've deployed over my 20-year career that they've called out and like, I didn't think about that. Thank you.
Mhm. Yeah, that's another great point too. Is that they're going to have great feedback for you. Not to throw a wrench in the project, but some things that are you haven't considered, or that you need to consider to take those people into account, because they're the ones, if they're meant to use it, right?
Exactly.
They need to have their thoughts out there. So I completely agree with that as well. Um, Now, before I throw it back to you for any final thoughts on the topic or the session, prior to the session, I went out to some early registrants and asked them to provide a couple of questions. And I think we just have time for one of them, but I tried to pick the most important one, at least ones that resonated with me. And I think it's a good one to ask, because it's for me, when I talk to anybody in OpEx or anybody in leadership, supply chain leadership, warehousing leadership, they always say the same thing. And this question sort of resonated with that. The question is from Tom. He's a warehouse director based out of Illinois. And his question is, what are the top 2 to 3 important processes that you commonly see being handled by tribal knowledge, experience, or even just gut feeling, that really should be handled by a system or network-wide SOP?
Yeah, I would say a couple come to mind. Exception handling. And what I mean by that is we develop systems and processes to handle the happy path. So what happens when it doesn't work through the happy path? And we
Mm-hmm.
usually have a team member or lead navigate that exception offline. Whether it's a goods to person technology or it's a pick and pack station technology, or there's always something that goes haywire, and we expect our team members to be able to handle that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the other one that comes to mind is I think most organizations have WMS systems and they have units, RF units, wearables, and I think one of the things I see too much that should be out of the hands of operations is kind of rebooting and restarting some of the challenges. So it goes back to a little bit back to technology. There's just so many things that we ask our frontline team members. They're there to run their operation. We don't we shouldn't expect them to handle technical issues or
Mm-hmm.
issues with systems. But a lot of times they through tribal knowledge, because they live it every day, they find workarounds and they do something, because at the end of the day, they have to get the case on the truck to service our customer.
Mm-hmm.
Um, when it comes to exception handling, troubleshooting technology, whether it's a wearable or a system or goods to person technology, we rely too heavily on that team member. And I would say the other thing, we kind of opened up a little bit with data mining. We have too many times that we have a lot of data. To your point, we're very enriched, but they'll look at it and say, well, yeah, the data says this, but I know this is happening and this isn't going to refresh until tomorrow, something. So that they know the ins and outs of the data. So a lot of times
Mm-hmm.
corporate organizations will look at, oh, the data is saying this, but at the end of the day, they know, they frontline, they live it every day. It's, that's only one piece of the true story. The other piece is this, and through tribal knowledge, they know this. Until you get boots on the ground or do Gimbo walks with the frontline team members, you don't see these things. But those kind of three things come to mind that I feel like that there's still a big opportunity from an organization, whether it's AI or other companies out there. How do we really tackle those types of issues
Mm-hmm.
that really impede frontline operations to servicing our customers?
Yeah, yeah, that's a great answer. And one thing that I was thinking of too, when I saw this question come in, because like I said, I hear it so often when I'm talking to operators, is and you kind of mentioned how important slotting optimization is, or slotting in general. It should really be a value driven process, and too often it's really, I wouldn't say it's an afterthought, because it's done every day, but the optimization part of it, even for new items, it's sometimes undisciplined, understandardized. It's often far too light on data, or the data is spread across 9 different sources. And in my business, we know when it's done right, you're talking about 6-figure savings, usually high 6-figure savings. And to me, that's one of the biggest, like you mentioned before, it's one of the biggest slam dunks, or one of the biggest, lowest hanging fruits that I can recommend to somebody. Is if you rely on, experience, you may have a great team, and we run through a lot of teams, a lot of Excel, elaborate Excel sheets. But what happens when the person is off? for a day, or what happens when they take holidays, or move to a different facility or new job. You're having to redo everything. And I think that's where a lot of people are going. That's our, it's in context. That's sort of our gateway into operational excellence, right? Because we're talking about slotting, and operational excellence, to your point, is heavily into that now, which is great to see. So that's kind of been our way into our doorway into that world is through slotting optimization. So that's the first thing that kind of came to my mind is how often it's underutilized, just as a process. I know there's some bias in there as well.
No,
Uh,
no, I would say, like I said, Robbie, I'm coming from a world where we had a strong program, went to another world that we didn't have anything. It was exactly that. It was tribal knowledge.
yeah.
Individuals, I've been doing this for 20 years.
Mhm.
This is how we do it. And then I come to an organization like Medline, and they are really dialed in, and it's a way of life here with slotting. There's no ins or buts about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. So with that said, Juan, I want to thank you, and I want to give you the last word as well on this, but I do want to thank you for joining me for this important discussion on operational excellence, and for sharing your experiences and actual insights with our viewers. I know through CSCMP Toronto Roundtable, it's something that a lot of members were looking forward to. I know a lot of the board members were as well. Um, there's a ton of valuable information here. I know that I mentioned that we have experience working with a lot of different teams, but it's certainly really insightful to listen to your experience more in depth, and sort of get into all the areas of operational excellence, not just kind of the part that I've been dealing with. So I do want to thank you for that, and I know this is going to be something that a lot of our membership at CSMP, and also at Sync Context, people that follow us on our LinkedIn page, they're going to be extremely excited to see this. So again, like whether you're in OpEx, supply chain leadership, or in operations, there's a ton of information here. So I do want to thank you for that, and for joining me and giving us your time.
Yeah, perfect. No, appreciate it, Robbie. Thank you for having me. Like I said, I'll just leave you with this when it comes to operational excellence, people, process, technology. We talk it all about all the time. I would just say never lose focus on the people, never lose light of sight. Always have them in the room. When it comes to process, understanding that you have well documented SOPs in the world of standards. Make sure you have technologies like slotting. I'm a true believer of slotting. Like I said, that should be a way of life. And
Mhm.
going a little bit into the technology slotting, but also look at areas where you can continue to find ways to take things out of the supervisor, the team member. If you could do things for that group and those individuals, it would go a
Mhm.
long way for them. Because at the end of the day, our goal in terms of operational excellence should be helping our team members and our supervisors to service the customer every day. The
Mhm.
work is difficult. It's a grind. So we always got to keep the people in forefront when it comes to operational excellence.
Absolutely. So for anybody looking at following Juan on LinkedIn, I'd suggest giving him a follow. And obviously, if anybody's not following us in context, we're sharing a lot of the stuff. We do these things every so often with executives like Juan, and to share his experience. So feel free to check our page out as well. But with that said, I appreciate everybody for being here today, for joining us on this discussion, and of course for Juan again. So I appreciate everybody, and hope to see you next time.
Thank you. Pleasure.